Hello and welcome to the July 15th edition of the Cluster API provider AWS Office Hours, a sub-project of both Cluster API and say Cluster Lifecycle. We have a relatively light agenda today, so if you have any items you want to discuss, please go ahead and add them to the agenda doc. I just linked it in the group chat. And to start off with today, I wanted to give a PSA to everybody that version 0.3.4 has been released. The main features there that the Cluster API components have been upgraded to 0.1.6, and it's also the first Cluster API release that is using the image promoter from the Kate's Infra working group. So one of the things that I would like to do going forward for the AWS provider releases is I would also like to switch to using the image promoter as well, unless there are any strong objections there. Some additional features have been added into the meeting notes. I don't see a need to necessarily bring them up directly here. You can read them in the release notes or in the meeting doc. And with that, are there any other agenda items before we dive into backlog grooming?
Should we talk about V1 Alpha 2 or we can do that next week?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
So master has been broken and the world as we know it has changed now. So a few changes, like we moved everything to the V1 Alpha 2 types, and there have been a bunch of issues open for V1 Alpha 2. I'm currently working on the AWS machine type, which is a new type, and like the controller logic, which is going to be like kind of like a merge of like the actuator and the old Cluster API machine controller. So it's going to be like a mesh of all of them, and then inside the machine controller. And the other type that we add is the AWS machine template, which is going to be what we're going to use for machine sets. Other than that, I mean, we're on a good track. Oh, and removed a lot of Bazel.
One question on that point. Are we moving most of Cluster API to off Bazel, or are you just kind of doing this as an experiment?
So baseline of thinking is if the Go tool, the standard Go tool, cannot do something, then it should go in Bazel. But if we have like a few lines of Go that can actually just like do like Go test or something, like we should just use Go. It's like much simpler. One thing that I haven't changed is the Golang CI tools, and that's actually pretty good if it stays in there, because then it fixes the version for every one of us. So like if we go and do make lint, then there's not going to be like any version mismatch between the linters. It's always going to be the same. So that's one of the nice things that I like about Bazel. It's like fixed version and stuff. But other than that, it was much more complicated before than it is now. So
yeah, I totally agree. I was just curious if you were also going to like do this for Cluster API or.
Cluster API has never used Bazel that extensively.
Yeah. So it's just the extra bits. Yeah. Got it.
Also, the Docker builds have been moved to non-Bazel Docker builds for Cluster AWS provider.
And did the customized stuff get moved?
No, that it's like kind of graph of like interdependency right now, so I'm just like gonna leave it there. And the other thing that's still there, it's the end-to-end tests, cool, which uses the customize stuff too.
All right, cool, sounds good.
That's it for me.
All right, any other topics before moving on to the grooming? Nope. All right, over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Jason. So we left off, according to the notes from last time, on issue 773, which is the first one on page 2. So we're just going to go do what's on page 1, and I'm going to work from the bottom up. So the first one is mine that I opened about not having to generate all of the generated code every time we run pretty much every single target in the makefile. This is not a high priority item, but I know Vince had made some changes to the cluster API makefile. So if someone's looking for something to do, this would be a good one to try and copy for what's in cluster API. I don't know that it necessarily has to come into the 0.4 milestone, but I think it would be a nice to have. So any objections to me moving this in?
I was gonna say like most of these are actually already done for like after I broke V1 alpha 2.
Oh, so should I just assign it to you since you spoke up?
Yep.
All right. Let me give this to Vince. Okay, thanks, Vince. So Andrew opened rename our build AMIs directory to build images.
So
Go ahead.
I think we can probably close this because we're going to be migrating the build tooling to a separate repo.
Yep. Okay. That's a good point. The image building is moving to a new repo, so we can close this.
Also, fun fact: it was actually build AMIs in the build images in the very beginning.
Oh. All right. Next up, Chuck. You don't like GoMock.
True.
Do we want to get rid of it?
I don't have time for this kind of project right now, or it's not that important compared to other stuff I'm doing, in my opinion. But I kind of like the idea of not having GoMock.
So I'm torn on it. Having previously been involved with doing some of the testing where we've had to build fakes for the AWS SDK, it became very painful to kind of build up those fakes and maintain those fakes over time. And GoMock simplified that part of things. But at the same time, GoMock is not ideal either. So I don't want to get in the point where we're like building all these complicated fakes and maintaining them. But
I mean, maybe we could, I hate to say this, build an abstraction layer that sits on top of AWS that has an API, like an AWS API that we like, that's friendly to us, and we can just hide the crazy implementation details behind, an implementation.
so that comes with challenges as well, because that was when we initially did an internal prototype for the AWS provider. That's how we built things out. And it turned out that we were passing a lot of data between that AWS abstraction layer and the actuator. So we simplified things when we created the AWS provider by having the shared scope that is passed down through and no longer had to kind of like marshal data back and forth through different layers.
I also know from past experience that the AWS SDK tends to return pointers to its own structs, and that makes it really difficult to put an abstraction layer there because you can't just turn a struct into an interface.
Yeah.
Or like that GoMock is actually over prescriptive more than like we don't want to mock anything.
Yeah, it's not about mocking things. I think mocks in unit testing in Go are pretty much inevitable. It's more that GoMock, the style of testing in GoMock is, I feel like it makes you test what is going to be called in the implementation how many times. And it's not, I don't know if that's exactly what we want to be testing. Like it ends up making us test and write a lot of things that we don't really need without giving us too much benefit that I've seen.
Can also be convenient sometimes to have like just an EC2 response and like be able to have a mock that basically returns that EC2 response. At least when I've been building kind of AWS tooling, I found that to be useful. which I don't think is GoMock, but necessarily. But I'm actually trying to remember if there is inside the EC2 API directly. I thought there was like a way you could basically give it those like JSON responses and say like, this is what I want you to pretend.
Yeah, they give you an interface that you can use, but if you want to do anything like track multiple requests and return different responses for different stages, there's nothing for that. And that's basically what led to the use of GoMock, so that we could basically return different responses to different requests at different parts of the cycle.
Makes sense.
All right, so I think we just leave this as a long-term thing and next to say we've triaged it.
Yeah.
Any other comments before I move on?
I'm not sure if that's a good first issue.
Yeah, maybe not. I think it probably depends on where we're using things, so I'll take that off. All right. Resize machine deployment fails. I thought Vince, we got this. Whoa, that was. What was the issue on this one, Vince? Oh no, Chuck, this was the nullable creation timestamp, right?
Yeah, I think so. Can you scroll to the top? I missed the beginning.
Yeah, this was the one where Shan.
This is the one. It's the difference between creating an object with the static client and the dynamic client. And they handle nulls differently.
Right.
Which changes the hash, which everything gets weird after that.
So Vince, you wrote you think this got fixed when we updated to controller runtime v2. Is this gonna be, that was for alpha 2, right?
Yeah, this is not v1 alpha 1. We could backport the object meta field. I don't know if we did, but if we wanted to, if we want to fix this, we can backport and change the, actually just, that would remove the creation timestamp, so this probably wouldn't happen. But I think there was a breaking change for v1 alpha 1 technically. So.
Okay.
I'll take a look because I think we actually merged that, but.
Yeah, let's touch base with Shan and see if still an issue for her. All right. Given that we think this was fixed with, what's going into CAPI v1 alpha 2, I think we can probably put this for 0.4 and say it's important soon, right?
Yeah. I can't. I don't know how it got. Did I miss how you explained how it got fixed, Vince?
So I'm trying to see if we actually backported this, but it was because we were embedding object meta from the meta v1 package into a spec, which then generates. So like the creation timestamp has a custom JSON marshaller, and it would expect that you actually pass in null instead of like just empty. And so that's like why validation would fail. But we actually added like a new object meta, like, so that's like a streamlined version of like what we actually only need for.
Oh, okay. That's what object meta was. I did see that, yeah.
Yeah, so now I don't know if we actually backported it. I'm trying to look.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right, so Vince, can you follow up on checking that? Thanks.
Will do.
Chuck, I'm going to take you off of this one, I think.
It's fine.
All right. NAT gateway timing issue. Create a cluster, delete it, recreate it with the same manifests. You get a new NAT gateway, but the old NAT way that's being deleted is getting attached to the routing tables because of a 60-minute window. This sounds like it's probably something that would be worth fixing. Anyone interested in signing up to at least look into this? If not, we can put help wanted.
Seems related to the, I don't think you triaged the issue I'd filed about security groups last time. I think that's still coming up, and
Okay.
it sounds related to that, so I guess feel free to assign me to it.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Sorry,
Oh.
that's Seth P.
Sorry, I was just looking at the name of the room.
Yeah, no, that's our fault.
Oops. And we will do this important soon, I think, unless anybody disagrees. And let's try and get this in. Okay. Container image promoter process. I think we can probably, so Jason, is this, we can close this or we're close to it?
I think we'll be close to it. We'll have to, I didn't want to do this the release on Friday using the image promoter. So the next release, we can go ahead and use that, and then we can close this out.
Okay, thanks. And I switched you to be the assignee since you had been taking point on that.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. Investigate what happens when a machine with a duplicate name of an existing machine is created in a different namespace. Chuck, or anyone, do you all think that we need to do this investigation, or are we confident that this is okay?
I think there might be an issue, but I'm fine to close it until we actually run into it.
This is different namespace, same account, right? And same region.
Yes.
Yeah, that will blow up.
Okay.
So for machines, I don't think machine will be an issue because don't we scope it down to the cluster via the tags?
No, but the name will be the same, and it has to be unique in AWS. Right?
The machine.
The name doesn't have to be unique.
Probably.
That's GCP.
Yeah. The only issue that I'm aware of as far as like duplicate names across namespaces would be with cluster objects today.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, you can close this.
But I think there was a comment in the machine actuator which says like we should be careful about something. I'm not able to remember what that exact thing was. Like the machine actuator, when it checks if the machine exists, there's a comment saying we do this, we pick the first one that matches, but maybe we shouldn't do that, or something to that effect. I'm trying to pull out that code.
Let's see.
Yeah, so if there's two machines in the same namespace with the same name, we will pick the first one, I think is what's happening. Because that's allowed in AWS.
I'm not finding that code. I will find it and post it in the channel.
Okay. So, well, actually, why don't you add a comment to this issue, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to leave this one as is. We'll get the comment that you found or that you'll find, Ashish, and we can follow up on this asynchronously. Sound good?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thanks. Add failure events to the cluster object. Jason, I know that you had been working on a PR to do some additional cluster and machine events, but I don't know that it had gotten to all the various AWS resources that we are doing. Are you still planning on adding that, or do you want somebody else to help out?
So I think there's two things. One, yes, I do still plan on adding the high-level events for the cluster, but it would be very much high-level failure. there's additional work that needs to be done to scope out kind of retriable versus non-retriable errors and handling that properly. And that's going to be kind of some that we need to sort out longer term.
Okay. So do you want to take this one and roll it into the PR that you're working on for the high level events for the cluster?
Yep. Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay. Gonna do important soon and 0.4. All right. Add retry to resource tagging. So I know that this is definitely something that we need to get into. So why don't we talk about this one? I imagine, Andrew, it probably goes or relates to your security group one. So is this something that we need a design document for each of the various resources and whatnot, or can we somewhat with a big hammer approach just say everywhere we're going to try and where we have to tag separate from creation, we're just going to retry some number of times?
So I think it's more complicated than that. Going back and reading some of the documentation around the eventual consistency of the AWS SDK, I think what we're going to end up having to do is anywhere where we where we create something and then we try to do something with that, we need to add in the kind of retry and back off logic.
So if the creation succeeded, assume that it did create, but we might not be able to use it for some period of time.
Exactly. And that's what's led to issues that we've had with the tagging and additional attribute changes on objects to date.
So I don't know anything. This is Caleb. I'm wondering, every place that could use a waiter in the SDK already uses one to do that kind of retry logic internally to the SDK.
So there's the retries in there for general API availability, and that works. But as far as I know, there's nothing baked into the SDK for retrying based on the eventual consistency state.
Well, I do think that this is something that's, if we can get around to it, it would be really nice to get it into 0.4 along with the V1 Alpha 2 release. So any objections to me putting it into the milestone?
No, and this is Seth P again. I've been burned enough times by this that I am intending to look at it. So you can assign it to me too.
Okay, thanks. If you do start working on it, please do the lifecycle active /command when you get a chance. Thanks. Okay, next up, mock generation broken with a specific version of Bazel. Jason. Are we still running into this? Do you know?
I believe it's already been resolved, but I'll follow back and double check. And
okay, thank you. Switch to containerd packages is closed. Refresh. Okay. AWS controller recreates VPC when setting attributes fails.
I think this goes right into that retry logic topic.
Okay. So part of...
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah.
We will go important soon and pull it into the milestone. And Seth, do you want to just have this too, since it's pretty much same type of thing? Okay. Chuck, you had a problem with 031.
I think that got resolved, but I'm not sure. I can try them again. I can try the new release.
Yeah, all right. So please try 0304 and report back. Handle stopped or terminated EC2 instances. Yeah, this is definitely something that I think we are interested in doing for V1 Alpha 2, given that we have said that the providers should assume that it's a one and done creation, and that some providers, if they want to, could try to remediate any issues with infrastructure, but I think it's safer if we just assume that the VM is, or if the VM is either stopped or terminated. Well, stopped is maybe a hard one to deal with, but at least terminated, we can update the status of the machine. This one might need a little bit of brainstorming around stopped instances. I think I can never get my cloud provider straight in the Kubernetes code base. I think AWS will, I'm trying to remember, is it the one of the ones that deletes the node if it finds a stopped instance, or does it allow it to remain? And does anybody know?
I
Last
don't
time I
know
checked-
for stopped. For terminated, it will definitely delete the node.
Yeah, I know that we've had some issues in the past with the OpenStack provider where I think if the OpenStack VM was stopped, it would just delete the node. I don't remember if that applied to AWS or not, but certainly for terminated, I think that Kappa should update the infrastructure status with an error message, and then that can get copied over to the machine status.
Yes, stop to may also be an update operation, which I know we're on the fence about like how to handle those. So maybe stop is a little different issue than terminated.
Not that it's conclusive, but from the like 20 seconds of searching through aws.go, it looks like terminated it removes, but stopped it just doesn't. It just ignores, more or less. It leaves them in the cluster.
Okay. Yeah, basically, from what I remember, it boils down to how it filters when it's looking for the instance by ID, and if it's only looking for running or pending, then anything that's stopped or terminated will get deleted. But I don't remember. So
It looks for anything that's not terminated.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
pending, running, shutting down, stopping, or stopped is what it considers when it's looking for instance by node name.
Awesome. Thank you for checking on that.
I have a bookmark for.
All right. Well, we at least can handle terminated, and we can look into stopped as well. And so I've put this into the milestone. All right. So we have. Oh, this was fixed. I just added this as an issue, so I need to close this one out. Document infrastructure ready and control plane ready annotations. So these were two new annotations that came in with my control plane machine race condition fix. And so we need to do some documentation. I will take this unless anybody else wants it. All right, let me do this one. Oops, I already had that there. And let's bring this into the milestone. Okay. Is it possible to provision with an internal load balancer so that it's not internet facing? I think we had said bring your own VPC and all your network, and you could do that, right?
we hard code the type of load balancer. So even if you bring your own VPC, we can't.
Okay.
What I said here is that if they wanted to make that 1 bit configurable so that it could work and bring your own VPC case, then that would be something to look at. But currently today it's not. It's always internet facing.
Well,
I think
the subnet that we pick.
What's that, Vince?
We'll need to change the subnet. I think we set the subnets that, or maybe the AZs. I don't remember, but it's a little bit more complicated just picking internal or external.
Right.
I can add some more details to this issue.
Okay. Anybody interested in working on this, or should I do help wanted?
Help wanted for me.
All right.
It's not a bad first issue.
Yeah, do we have to not bad first issue label?
It's not necessarily a good one either, though.
Yeah, it is a first issue.
All right. I put this at next, given that it's not, doesn't appear to be high priority for any of those of us on the call right now. Okay. Use plain Go to run tests. Vince, did you already make this change?
Yes, but the end-to-end test is still using the Bazel stuff.
All right. Do you want me to assign this to you, or?
No, I can update it like this. Just need the end-to-end test. I'll do that now.
Okay. Do you want this for 0.4?
No, probably next is fine.
Okay. And I'll just give you a note here. Description. Okay. And you are currently working on migrating master to V1 Alpha 2. This to me is our P0. And we might as well assign you, Vince. Any other comments on this one?
No, the first PR got merged. Now I have, I'm just like working on the second PR, but it's much larger than I expected.
All right, so removing a good portion of the bootstrapping code related to kubeadm and cloud init, but not all of it, since we still need the Bastion, cloud init data for the Bastion host. Chuck, you are not actively working on this. Anybody interested in signing up? If not, we can just wait.
I can take it. This is Rudoy. Because I ported it over to the Bootstrap provider, so I kind of have it in my brain.
Okay, thanks.
I think the issue with that ticket was figuring out how to deal with the Bastion host.
Yes, yeah, making sure that we can still do it. Although the cloud init for the Bastion host is a relatively simple script that just downloads another shell script from an S3 bucket that Amazon maintains and runs it. So I don't know if there's some way that we could try and simplify that so that it didn't need cloud init. I mean, presumably we could bake it into images, but then we would require everybody else to build their own Bastion images. So that's just, it's food for thought, because then we could
fully remove it, yeah.
All right, Vince, you have the AWS machine controller validating webhooks for V1 Alpha 2 types. I guess just these two, so we might as well take them one at a time. Are you?
Yeah, I just
working on this.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The validating webhook.
This I might even put it to next if you, or I don't know, because we'll need some story around Pure Builder and like how to generate certificates, and it's pretty heavy. So maybe help wanted.
Can you come back in here and add some more details?
Yes. We'll do so.
Okay. Then we have controller can generate an ELB name that is too long. So if you give a cluster name that is sufficiently long, it ends up saying I can't have a load balancer name that is more than 32 characters. And we had some back and forth. My last suggestion was we take a look at the cluster's name. If it's greater than 32 characters, then we could come up with some formula for using a portion of the cluster's name along with a unique random set of characters and have that be the load balancer name. So I'm gonna just say important soon because it's nice to have our software working, and help wanted unless anybody feels super motivated to do it.
Is there?
I'll sign up for it.
Sorry.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Seth.
Go, Seth, go.
So is there a short path to like, can we use an open API validation to reject things that are longer than 32 characters? Or sorry, is this already covered in this ticket?
Well, so basically different cloud providers have different length maximums on that. So like, sure, we could restrict it to the shortest one.
Oh, but it's a cap.
Like
right,
yeah, so like
right,
Azure's
okay.
like 80 characters or something like that.
Well, there's technically nothing stopping us from adding a validating webhook that watches CAPI clusters and validates their names. But in terms of open API, yeah, I think what Andrew was saying is right, that it varies per provider. All right, so I'm going to leave this one as help wanted, and we'll see what happens. Okay, the failure to tag. Anything additional we need to say about this one, or is it we've pretty much covered it in terms of retries for eventual consistency?
Mm-hmm.
Soon in the milestone. Okay.
Assign me, I suppose.
Ready. And the last one about unable to remove a cluster because it couldn't remove the finalizer because the object has been modified. And after Vivek filed this one, I did a little bit of digging, and in Kappa's cluster actuator delete call, we update the cluster, and that will give it a new resource version. As soon as the delete call returns, the CAPI cluster controller then tries to do an update, but it doesn't retrieve the changes to the cluster, so it has the old resource version and gets this conflict. So we might end up needing to do a fix in cluster API to try and deal with this, so that it knows, okay, I've called delete on the actuator might have modified the cluster, so we need to go retrieve the update. I don't know if that's maybe too simplistic, if we drop some things accidentally, but at the very least, I'm fairly certain that's why this conflict is happening.
So you just volunteered for a fix?
What's that?
Yeah,
I can work on it. I mean, I do think that, like, I will test this and see if it's like every single time you try and delete a cluster, does it get this conflict error? I would expect it to. And then if that's the case, I can go to the release 0.1 branch in CAPI and see if I can do a fix. So I'll leave this issue in Kappa for now, but I may transfer it over to CAPI based on what I find.
Sounds good. And this seems like also might be high priority as well.
Yeah, I just yeah, so he said it gets stuck into an endless loop. Like I've never the only time I've ever been unable to delete a cluster is if I have machines that are still around and I try to delete the cluster first. But as long as the machines are gone, then I've never had an issue eventually getting rid of the cluster. So yeah, I will investigate this one.
So this might go back to, I was having a discussion with somebody about trying to remove a machine and it failing because the load balancer didn't exist. So it may be some type of a deadlock between the machine and the cluster, both not being able to make progress because of that.
Okay, well, I'll take this one. And that is it for open issues that have not been triaged. So any other business for anybody? All right, Jason, I think we can call this a meeting then.
Sounds good. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks all.
very much.
Thanks. See you.